Deciduous Azalea, so it does lose its leaves. It does have a nice fall color to it when the conditions are right. It will become, 4 to 6 feet tall, maybe a little bit taller in a shaded environment. It blooms in May and kind of a pink flower, a soft pink flower. And it sets its buds, yeah, exactly. As, I think, for the most part, all rhododendrons do. They set their buds the year before. So never prune in the fall or in the summer.
You said rhododendron.
This azaleas are rhododendrons. All azaleas are in the rhododendron genus. No, we're better than that. Not to hate on PJM, because PJM is a local plant. We do like our PJMs. They're just, that's how they're common. Right? Yeah. Not as interesting. No, we love the work. They've done tremendous amount of good breeding work up at Weston Nurseries. That's where the PJM came from. So, a lot of respect for those guys. But we want something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun, and that's why we went with this native deciduous azalea. So timing and sighting, so full sun to partial shade, even more heavier shade. The best flowering is the more open grown plant, the more sun you get, the more flower buds you're likely to get on your plant. So kind of a nice protected spot from winter winds here by the privet. Hopefully some morning shade from the Nora maple. Yeah. So what time of year do you want to plant it? Well, we're going to plant it now in the early fall here when it's a little bit cooler. You can see it's a nice robust plant. When we went to the nursery, picked out the plant, obviously you want to look for a plant that's robust and healthy up top, but you also want to pull it out of its pot if it's in a container and make sure that root system is healthy too. And I say that all the time, and I'm telling you, when I went on the shopping trip, I made that mistake. I had a little too much faith in what I was seeing up top, and I didn't pull it out of the pot. And if I had pulled it out of the pot, I knew it was going to be a goner. It was a Fothergilla. Anyone familiar with Fothergilla, witch alder? And the plant had very little root system on it. It had been overwatered or had been consistently moist through the winter, and it didn't leaf out really, and it died. So always, if you can, take your plant out of the pot and inspect the root system. So John has prepared our hole here. Other John has widened the hole. This is a plant with a shallow root system, so you don't need to make it that deep. If you always dig a little bit deeper than you want it though, because then you can backfill with some soil and amended soil, as we're going to do with some compost. But the root system will definitely spread. So a lot wider than deep is always the name of the game when planting a shrub or a tree. And again, with your root you usually probably want something at least twice as wide, ideally 3 times as wide as your root ball. All right, so John is going to mix in some compost here. So we got Coast of Maine, and this is their manure amended compost. So John is going to mix about 40% compost, 60% native soil together, and that's what we're going to use to backfill.
And when it comes to planting in this shallow hole, because it does have a shallow root system, I do suggest to always take something like this right here, something that's a little bit sharp, and you want to kind of scar the edges a little bit. That way it's going to make it a little bit easier for the root system to expand as it's establishing. So, just nothing crazy, just kind of scarring it up a little bit, because when you're making the initial hole with like a shovel or a spade, you kind of end up flattening it out, and it's kind of got no pores that are going to be able to be expanded into.
So we're going to pull the plant out of the container. Okay. John, we're just gonna go in here and we're gonna see, because what height do we want to plant it at?
What are you looking for in the root that you say you would pull it out?
You want to see nice, healthy root growth. So you want to see white roots, healthy roots, and ideally, the best plants are established enough to where you're going to see roots at the edge of the root ball. You're not going to see it's not going to be soil just breaking away. You're going to see an established root system, and that it kind of holds itself in place. But this is perfect right now. We actually did repot this plant. So we repotted it when we got it. So we grew it on for a season. So how deep do I want to plant my azalea? Do you think I'd want to plant it this deep? No. But it's not probably, we don't have to backfill probably as much as I thought we did. But the thing I will say, especially with our native deciduous azaleas, is they are pretty adaptable. And if you do plant them too deep, they actually will produce roots from the stems. But it's not an excuse to plant your trees too deep.
Right.
You want to plant it at the right height. So typically you want to start to see some root flare develop at the base of your plant. You want to see that transition zone between shoots and roots.
Okay.
So how much was that again? That was probably around
4 inches.
4 inches.
Yeah.
So John has done a good job of removing rocks and grass clumps from the soil. So we got a nice, beautiful, loamy soil to deal with here. And we've moistened it just to make it less dusty. We've moistened the hole as well, just so that there's not dust clouds as we're working with this material.
A little higher so you can compost after you plant it?
We are going to plant it a little bit higher. We are going to plant it a little higher. We brought mulch today, so we're going to be able to mulch up around the root ball. Plus, it'll probably settle a little bit in time.
Okay.
I would recommend, you know, like a pine bark mulch or just a typical bark mulch, something that'll suppress weeds, that won't break down too quickly, but it does break down in time and kind of add some organic matter to the soil. And that's why we're adding this compost, to add some organic matter, to increase the soil's fertility a little bit and moisture holding capacity. So add some of this. Now, what kind of soil do azaleas and rhododendrons like?
Acidic.
Acidic soil. And typically around here, that is not a problem. In southern New England, that is not a problem. Our soils are plenty acidic. In Newport, we can grow rhododendrons and azaleas as well as anybody. So usually not too worried about soil acidity. But in a place like Cincinnati, Ohio, that is certainly something you're going to have to worry about. So it all depends on location. They do have good soil in Cincinnati, just very alkaline.
Okay. Don't they have a lot of clay though?
Yeah, heavy clay. I'd say we probably even want to go a little bit higher than that because we want to plant it a little high, like I said, because we're going to mulch up around it and it's going to settle. Exactly.
It's nice to have
I'll
soil.
have John throw some soil in there. And what I'm going to start to do is I'm going to start to tease at the root system. So you don't just want to plop your root ball in there, right? You want to tease the root system. And I'm sorry, John, I'm going to make a little bit of a mess. Well, I guess we've got the tarp, right? Let's use the tarp. What you can do also is you can use the handle of your shovel. That's probably pretty good right there. A little high, right? And what's going to happen again is as I'm going to tease my root system, the root ball is going to get a little smaller. So that's probably good. We'll probably end up adding a little bit more. So I like to use my fingers, but you can use a tool. Just kind of work that root system. Make sure those roots are flared out and ready to explore the soil, not curl back in on themselves. You want to go all the way around the root ball. You can see that root system. Nice healthy root system to go with a nice robust. And there's where your root growth is the best, actually, right there. So don't forget that. All right, I'm going to hand this to John, and he's going to measure it again.
Smell that.
Yeah, see? Yeah, it definitely got lower. So
Definitely got lower.
after checking it and seeing that it got even lower because of the amount of soil that we took off the root ball, since this is what it initially grown in, we can even take some of what we had initially taken off and mix it in to some of the soil that's native to the ground around it and all the stuff that we just put in the backfill, so we can even put some of that back in here as well. So that would be looking at the environment that you're putting it in, and depending on if it was going to be a really large shrub or a tree that's going to get to a certain size, if you see that there's a certain way that it's growing, say you had a tree that might have a couple of limbs that are very prominent that might actually end up, you know, hitting a car or being something that might be a hindrance in the future, you probably want to angle it at the initial planting into a more open space. So for this one in particular, I think it's kind of just based off of whatever looks the best in terms of preference.
We're working that mulch into the soil. And this is a pine bark mix that this soil is in, and pine bark is acidic. So that'll add to the acidity of the soil a little bit, which will be good.
How often should we water this if we're not getting any rain?
The first season it'll probably, if we're in dry periods, at least weekly, probably every 5 days. So yep, Jon is gonna, I like how he's positioned the nice attractive portion of the shrub out towards the parking lot and towards where people are gonna be walking. And he's right in the middle of the hole. And he's stood the shrub upright. It's a lot easier to tell with a single stem tree, right? How straight your plant is. He's kind of made a berm there to secure it and kind of prop it up, because you can see the root system. There's kind of a gap in the middle of the root ball, so you can kind of secure that gap on top of this little berm and let the roots kind of flare down the sides.
Yeah, it looks like a good height. It'll compress down a little bit. Yeah.
All right, now we start our backfill.
And then as you're putting in soil and doing the backfill to kind of secure the plant in place, as you're putting some in, you kind of want to push down on the soil so that it's not all completely loose, to make sure that there's not going to be a whole lot of settling over time, because we just want maybe an inch or two, depending on how high we're actually planting it at this initial planting. So just make sure that when you're putting anything in the ground, you're just kind of giving it a light push. Nothing too crazy.
All right, now we'll do our first watering, and that'll kind of get the air pockets out of there. It'll settle the soil.
It's gonna need any special care for winter?
Shouldn't need any special care for winter. We're planting it at the time where it's a little bit later, it's cooler. It's, planting, it's not gonna get stressed out as a plant would, say, if you were to plant it in the middle of August. But we're also giving it time to establish its root system before the ground freezes.
But it's going to need to be watered like every week.
All right.
Now, once this is established, it's pretty dry.
This is probably a plant that probably likes more moist soils. So I would say definitely for the first 2 to 3 years, regular watering will be helpful.
Tomorrow looks sunny, even warmer than today. Yes, we'll have to get the next one.
And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do a little bit of pruning here. I'm going to remove some pieces off of it.
I feel it. It's just I can feel the cold coming. It's just the metal. I don't know. My whole body just.
And make sure you want to make sure there's that soil isn't just loose. You want to tamp it down a little bit, secure it around the root ball, as Jon said. So we're going to start to form our berm a little bit. We're going to make a berm around the sides. So you can see here, making the berm. And what's the berm for? Hold the water and have that water soak down into the root system of the plant. All right, what's next?
Beautiful.
Do a little water, and then what's after the water? Mulch, yeah.
About how much water do you think once a week in gallons?
In gallons, probably around 5 to 7 gallons.
Okay.
Maybe even more than that, depending on how dry it is. Because a lot of water, depending on what time of day you water and how you water, some of that water can be lost.
I did it a few times with Marvin.
So you want a nice, 3-4 inch thick layer of mulch.
Artie looks happy.
And the nice thing about this mulch is there's a lot of chips, but there's also leaves and other stuff. So it's a nice mix of like leaf mulch and bark mulch. And it breaks down and adds to the organic matter of the soil. And see how John's, he's clearing the mulch away from the base.
Why?
And the berm is under the mulch, so we can kind of cover the berm with mulch, because when it gets water, the berm is still going to do its job. It's just not visible.
And I'm removing the mulch from the base of the azalea, and it should be done with anything that's being planted, because the whole point of mulch is to add organic matter back into the soil. It's to make sure that there's plenty of soil moisture so that it's not evaporating when the sun comes out and it's really, really hot. So if this is going to help retain moisture, if we've got all this mulch right up here at the base of the plant, it's going to start to get really, really wet, and it might start to rot the base. So anytime you plant anything woody, you want to make sure that you do not have any mulch anywhere near the actual base of the plant. So over time, animals will come over here, a little bit of wind will blow it in there. As long as it's not a really thick layer like we're doing right here, then you're probably all right. But if you ever just walk past it and you see mulch touching the base, just come on over and just give it a little.
Now, how about for the winter mulch? Because we have some new roses on the property that I need to mulch before winter. Same principle for the rose? Because
in my experience with roses,
right on the bud union.
yeah, in my experience, we didn't. At Blakewell, we never really mulched in our roses for the winter. You can do that. I guess it also depends on what kind of roses they are, but that is something I have heard about. I think you can, because again, it's temporary. It's sometimes,
and then you remove it
and then you remove it, right?
It all out.
Sometimes people literally will mulch volcano a tree so much that it actually just kind of becomes, it'll break down, and it actually just becomes like the bed, so it's not something that you can pull away. It's something you'd have to excavate.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of the time, certain tree species, when there is volcano mulching going on, if you were to remove it after some time, you'll see roots, which is not what you want.
So again, just moistening it to settle it down a little bit. All right, any last questions?
Very nice.
Thank you.